So James Bond, now in exile from America, spends his time in Mexico in the 1950s, just in a sweaty spy drama where he slinks from bar to bar and passing the time by seducing young Spanish boys. It's actually great. So Luca Guadagnino's Queer, and also styled as William Burroughs Queer. It's a spiritual sequel to his novella Junkie. This is also something, like a lot of William S. Burroughs' work, was written in the 1950s and wasn't published until like the late 70s, early 80s. It's from Luca Guadagnino. So he had 2 films out in 2024, the other being, of course, Challenges, the horny bisexual tennis movie. And he's back with another sultry, complicated relationship, and it's a little bit less like Call Me By Your Name and a little bit more like the third act of Suspiria. Not nowhere near that intense, but it definitely takes you places you wouldn't expect it to go. And if you're familiar with William S. Burroughs' work, you know, he obviously delves with, and especially the 1950s, the corners of society that didn't get a lot of spotlight in a puritanical American society. And this is obviously a sequel to his, I guess, his homosexual alter ego, wink wink, character from Junkie and his twilight years in exile in Mexico. And by, I guess, the fact that he's an opium addict and also a queer man in the 1950s automatically makes him a criminal by American 1950s puritanical standards. So he spends his time, you know, passing by a typewriter on the way in and out from his sweaty apartment to the different bars. And the way this film shots, it feels almost like a cowboy film from the 1950s. I mean, they're obviously shot on location, but there also has these moments where it looks like it's matte painted backgrounds or beautifully lit sets. I really enjoyed this. It's, you know, I joked when I said it was like a sweaty spy film, but it has this almost like a stakeout, kind of just like waiting in, you know, in one foreign location to get your orders. And instead of a government body, he's waiting for inspiration to strike for his writing. He becomes infatuated with this young expat from America, fresh out of the army. He's kind of naive, but he can't quite get a read on him. You know, he seems to frequent a lot of the same establishments that he does. So he's trying to suss him out. Obviously, this is before the days of Grindr, where you just had to cast your shadow across a man in a bar and then hopefully, you know, sparks would fly. So Daniel Craig's character spends a lot of time successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, a lot of the times, bar hopping and lurking and hitting on young men. There's obviously a bit of a power imbalance. I think Daniel Craig's character likes him a lot more than he likes him. I think Daniel Craig's character is a lot more infatuated with him than he can reciprocate. With all the stages, he feels like he's begrudgingly wearing him down slowly. I guess romance from the 1950s was just a series of light stalkings until your grandpa asked your grandma to marry him. So, you know, in an antiquated sense of romance, he stalks this young man and woos him into submission in sorts. And Daniel Craig is fantastic in this. He has this sweaty desperation, but also this drunken masculine machismo. He walks around in 1950s Mexico City with a gun, very visible open carry policy with old mate, you know, and it's a little bit overcompensating, but he's also on the run from something. It also gives him a dangerous kind of swagger about him. I guess he's on the run as well for playing William Tell and killing his ex-wife, be she beard or not. And he's haunted by this, and this is obviously one of the major, I guess, trauma points that keeps him coming back back to opiates and keeping him suspended in that purgatory that he kind of gives himself and that it comes along with drug addiction. And that kind of goes out the window when he goes to travel to deepest, darkest Peru to find, I think he calls it yage, but essentially it's ayahuasca in the jungles. And I guess he read about it from some article in Reader's Digest or something. It's not very known, but he's also clearly inexperienced, and I think people can see his drug-addled old ass coming from a mile away. So he convinces his friend, they were roommates, to come with him to deepest, darkest Central America to find this sacred vine. And he ends up bumping into this amazing character who I love, who's this bruja, this lady who was a botanist and a professor who's lost down there in the deepest, darkest jungles of Central America researching plant medicines. And she is fantastic. She's got a pet sloth and seems to be very in tune with the jungle. And she, after a very stressful induction interview, accepts these gringos, accept these sweet gentlemen of leisure into the sacred ceremony. She acts as a shaman and helps guide them through this ayahuasca experience. And that's where it takes this sort of, if you're familiar with David Cronenberg's Naked Lunch, it takes on a very psychedelic, almost Cronenberg-y body horror in this aspect, as they look at each other and checking in to see if the ayahuasca's hit yet, and they're like, I feel nothing. I don't feel anything either, and of course, a minute later, the jungle jumps down their throats and completely takes them for a wild ride. Yes, it's a bit more of a slow-paced, kind of laid-back tone compared to something as high energy as Challengers, but if you're a fan of Luca Guadagnino, if you're a fan of films like Naked Lunch by David Cronenberg, if you're a fan of noir, it definitely feels like a classic film in a way. It uses a lot of classic filmmaking techniques, and it's a beautiful film to look at. It's got this amazing score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who's obviously worked with Luca before. It's great. I think hopefully it's being brought out by A24, so, in Australia, if their distribution is getting better, hopefully it comes out soon. It's definitely a little bit more weird than something like Call Me By Your Name, but it's not as mortifying as his remake of Suspiria, but it's definitely unique in its own regard. So he's definitely a fantastic director. He keeps coming out with interesting projects. I'm really interested to see what he does next. Daniel Craig, Luca Guadagnino in a sultry, sweaty noir, and it's a devastating queer love story in a regard as well. It's a romantic period noir film, really. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely check this one out. I've been Jake at Video Castle Reviews. I'll see you on the next one. All right, cheers, guys. Bye.